Fantastic. Okie dokie. So meeting this afternoon. I'm looking now to get to trim the fat, if you like, off of these, so we're not quite as lengthy, which particularly is after school, even if it's in the school day. Looking at a maximum an hour and a half. We'll be done by absolute max today, 5 o'clock, but probably before that. I think short and snappy and sweet, getting some key points across is the spot that we want to be in, which is fab. So that's what we'll aim to do. And we'll start with a few updates from my side, from my end. I'm going to start here actually with one of my colleagues who asked me just to have a little push and a probe and a prod. Danny, who works with us at North Yorkshire Sport, asked me just to bring up and mention the Active Live survey, which may have been sent your way at some point in the past couple of months. The deadline is the 31st of March, so there is another month, but he just wanted me to do a broad sweeping prod to those who are on the call whose schools may have been asked to do this. It is ultimately of a huge benefit to the schools completing it, not least because the information is fed into a large database and it really informs the direction of which PE, school sport, physical activity goes by the powers that be in futures going forward. If it's not answered and we don't get that real data of what's going on and what's happening in schools right now, it becomes very difficult to do that with a clear picture of what's happening out there. So just as a bit of a reminder, if it's something you've seen or you know a colleague has got, if you wouldn't mind giving them a little prod and a reminder and saying, look, if you can complete this before the 31st of March, it'll be hugely beneficial to us as a county, because we can be very much data informed then with what we provide and what we put on with our provision. If you need anything at all regards to that or have any questions, the email address on the screen there is the email address that you're going to want to visit. If you've not had it sent, it's likely that your school hasn't been targeted for that this year, for whatever reason that may be. So if that's the case, don't worry about it. Okie dokie, lovely. I'll move on. I'm just going to touch upon the premium, just because why not? It's something which has been around long enough now, and there's no change from me here. Hopefully the bulk of you on the call have had the opportunity or have already filled out your reporting template for the year and potentially already spent the money that you've been given. I can categorically say as of right now, and this is usually the case this time of year, there has been no update from the DFE in terms of whether or not this will continue into the 23-24 academic year. Just like always, as soon as I know, I will inform everybody involved across North Yorkshire, but often it's one of the first things that will pop up on the social media platforms, whether it's Facebook, Twitter, and you'll see those tweets from AFP and other PE folk. They usually will let you know before anybody else as well. In terms of that, if you haven't completed it, same as you were in previous years with this, in terms of the deadline of the 31st of July and making sure that the report is published and up to date, swimming being a focus and top up. And I've had a discussion with my own child's school about this and raised it. I was made aware that my children's school, my son who's now in year 5, hadn't attended swimming. He missed it in year 3 when they usually do it. And I raised this and there was no intention of him actually going swimming at this point. So I made a point to raise that, and I think they're now looking into using some of the spending to do some top up and catch up swimming, particularly from those years missed by COVID as well. So certainly an area to consider. In terms of your reporting template, many of you have individualized ones I've seen on many schools' websites, and that's absolutely fine, but that would always be my default go-to here as well, with the hyperlink on the screen of using AFP's template. Even though it says July 2021, that is indeed still the most up-to-date template that we are looking at using for the PE and Sport Premium reporting. I just want to touch upon now a couple of bits and pieces in terms of opportunities and resources that's going ahead for CPD across the county in the next few months. Starting off here, we have got another level 5 and 6 primary school PE subject specialism course. That's going to be starting in September 2023. That is now live on North Yorkshire Sports website. There's a couple on the call who've attended that with me. I am the tutor on that course and deliver all of the sessions. We've already heard from Amy. I think she's been along to the course with us, and I think I've seen Louise on the call. You are here, Louise, right? If you are, just unmute and give me a hi. probably busy, aren't you? And that's why you're not muting. I thought I admitted Louise earlier onto the call. She's obviously very shy. I was hoping she could say a few nice words. But if that's something of interest, certainly for any underspend that you maybe have from the premium, and certainly nearer the time, if DFE are generous to us and they announce the premium continuation, and if that hopefully continued into next year, it could be something that you want to come on yourself, or you've got other members of staff you might want to send on. What I would say then, Louise, you are here. I can see you've typed in the chat there. If you have got any lovely words to say about the course or myself, feel free to add them in the chat. I won't be offended unless there's any swear words. Okay, next one. Just want to draw your attention, as I always do, to the Yorkshire and Humble Learning community. Free to access, modules added over a period of time, and it's a great bite-sized platform for CPD to jump onto small courses and videos to learn bits and pieces. I always draw your attention towards some of the physically active learning ones on there, which helps in creating that whole school physical activity approach. And there are new modules coming up, one which I recently recorded with Janelle, the head teacher from Greatwood Primary School, talking about her physical activity provision, and that should be going live anytime within the next few weeks. So well worth checking out, and it's free for you to access. Of course, I always bring up the transition toolkit, which you can access here from the link which you can see on the screen, which is something you can use yourselves in your schools or give to other staff and teachers, particularly this time of year, as the year sixes will be looking forward to that transitional piece coming up in the summer when they might visit their high schools. And it's a great piece of work to go through with accompanying videos and suggestions for activities where you can work alongside your pupils on various modules that you can see on the screen there, such as understanding self, self-management, goal setting, problem solving, and the like as well. Couple more from me. Teacher of school swimming qualification. This is coming up in 2 months' time, and there are still a few spaces left. I believe there's 3 or 4 spaces still available for this course. Great to send any members of staff on who want to become qualified at delivering curriculum swimming, and that would obviously save future costs where you wouldn't have to pay for deliverers at a leisure centre or your swimming provider, as you can provide that in-house yourself. So there's 2 or 3 spaces left for that. If you visit North Yorkshire Sports website, you can see the 2 dates are very close together. You can book yourselves on or other members of staff on using some of the PE premium money or other funding that's available, and it'll be good to see you there, as I'll be attending one of those days as well. And then finally, I shared this one last time, just a couple of things from Fran, one of our SGOs in North Yorkshire. She always wants us to draw attention to some of these inclusive PE CPDs here in terms of for your autistic or SEND children, and just some free learning that you can access to get on board with, just to top up some bits and pieces that may be of use to you. Of course, this is being recorded, so you can jump back on and find these, but here's some useful links and useful websites for that you can jump on to begin with and start with that as well. Thanks for posting in the chat there, Louise, as well. I appreciate it. And thanks for mentioning my name in brackets. I'm going to fast forward to a bit of PE deep dive work. Okay, so we went through all of this a moment ago. And it's with my delight that we can welcome Abby onto the call now. Abby Ramsbottom, I'll give it, you can do an introduction yourself in a moment, Abby, but I wanted Abby to come on the call because I know that she, as recently as this academic year, experienced a deep dive into the subject of primary school PE, and as the PE lead for her school has been through that process, and I wanted her to come onto the call to share her insights, her story of how the day went, the sorts of things that she was asked and things that she found out. And I think it will be really useful whilst Abby's speaking, if you've got any questions for Abby, if you want to populate the chat with those questions, once she's finished sharing some bits and pieces, I can go through and facilitate asking your questions to Abby, and we'll take it as a bit of a Q&A, an opportunity to learn from one of our peers here in the county, and hopefully that can help inform you as to the practice that you take back to your school. So thank you for your patience. Abby, if you are indeed still there, welcome. And do you want to give a brief introduction to all the people still on the call who've persevered?
Hi, I'm Abby Ramsbottom. So I'm a teacher at Lacato Primary School in Catterick Garrison. We've got about 470 pupils in our school, so very big primary school. Obviously, we are on the garrison, so the majority of our children are military. So that's a massive background for us. So we were recently inspected in September, which feels like forever ago now. I'm sure those people that have got it coming up are still sort of biting their nails, thinking just get it over and done with. So yeah, we were in September. And I want to just say before I start, please don't worry, because I was so panicky, and it was my first Ofsted. I've never done one before. And to say that I'd done a deep dive as well, I was beside myself. And actually, it was a really enjoyable experience. And it was a time that you could just showcase what you do and what we all do so brilliantly.
Yeah, lovely. Well, thanks for joining us, Abby. I appreciate it. I appreciate your patience, and I'm sure everybody else will appreciate you just sharing a bit about how that whole process went for you, and what you discovered about the school and what you were doing, what worked, and maybe things that sent you off the rails that you maybe weren't prepared for. I'm not sure. So if we just start off with then just telling us a little bit of context and tell us a bit about what the process entailed from start to finish. What did it look like?
Yeah, so on the morning, we had, because we were quite a big school, we had quite a few inspectors. I think we had 4 or 5. I think one was training, so we ended up with 5 in the end. So we sort of introduced themselves and told them exactly who was going to be working with who. So I got a girl called Emily, and she introduced herself, and then I got set a timetable of what it was going to look like, really. And the lead inspector just sort of said, in the morning we'll be looking at this, and the afternoon we'll be doing this. So ours was in the afternoon for PE, and sort of started off with, she just asked me to come into the room, and she just basically wanted to know, what does PE look like in Lakato? What am I expecting to see when we're sort of around here? And what do you think that you've been working towards as a school to help you sort of get to where you want to be? She then sort of said to me that she wanted to observe a couple of lessons of PE. So she wanted to see 2 lessons in particular, but I also wanted her to see EYFS. And I thought that was a massive strand, because I always feel like sometimes they get sort of thrown off or forgotten about. So I really wanted to have the opportunity to see that. So I made sure that she could walk through and sort of look at EYFS and the provision that we have. And then it sort of involved as well, once she'd observed the lessons, just speaking to the children, letting them sort of be the voice of the school and speak about what they've been learning about, where the prior learning was, where we're going, where we're heading with everything. And that's sort of how this sort of day went, really.
Okay. And in terms of the lessons that were observed, Abby, did you tell her which 2 she was going to observe, or did she dictate that based on what was on the day? I suppose. Well,
yeah, I think that's one thing I was always worried about as well. They didn't actually dictate to us which year group that she wanted to see, which was quite nice. So it was just a sort of case of, they're doing PE anyway. And then there was my lady who was absolutely fantastic at PE that I would love to show. So she obviously did a lesson for me as well, which was really helpful. So no, she wasn't very specific about that. It was just what was in the timetable at the time that she was looking, really.
Okay, interesting. And I like the fact that you raised this, and it was less of them, but flying the flag for the EYFS stuff and the early years stuff, for them to say, look, this is what we're doing here as well. And there's a good friend of mine who, a year or so back, when he had a deep dive, he was hugely advocating the fact of showing them what you want them to see, and not just playing by their script. So they will have things they need to ask, but if you've got things that you want to show off and talk about in your school that you think you do bloody well, then tell them and show them, and make a point of saying, look at this that we're doing over here. So I think that's fantastic that you raised that flag and said, well, actually, the EYFS stuff as well, it begins there, just so they can see the thread that goes through, which is fab.
Upon, and they loved the fact that when they did the deep dives, the majority of our subjects did include EYFS. So I think that sort of highlight for us. And even just, it was just taking her, when we were observing one of the lessons, taking her via that way so she could see what we're doing going on.
Yeah, so you were able to dictate that and sort of show off the best of what you wanted to show them and what you wanted to offer. And what when in the lesson observations, was there anything in particular you noticed that the inspector was looking for, asking? What were they focused on during the lessons they observed?
She didn't really ask me as much as I thought. I thought she'd be asking me quite a lot, but she was observing quite a lot what was going on. And I think it was more of the pace of the lesson, looking at things like what the teacher was saying, so what vocabulary she was using throughout the lesson. So they were doing tag rugby, and she said something like, imagine you're picking the ball out your pocket, and she loved that. She think that was a great analogy. Sort of thing. But I would say more of she was just looking at how the lesson was flowing, really, and what were the kids involved, because all the children were active, they were doing something. which was great.
Okay, Brill, that's fantastic. And then, of course, you said there was opportunity for you to, through a number of questions, sit down and talk through what you do, maybe show some documentation and bits and pieces. So what were some of the questions that they asked you, and what did you either say or show or do in response to some of the questions that came your way?
So one of the questions that they asked was, the first one that she asked was, what does PE look like in your school? So we talked through the long-term plans, the medium-term plans, the skill coverage. And I was trying to be big on the fact that it was not just skills, it was the knowledge as well, sort of thing, and trying to link them both together, because we were at that time where everyone was saying, we've all gone skill-based. Is it skill or is it knowledge? So you're trying to throw them both in there in the conversation, and the fact that it began at EYFS, really. Another thing that she asked was, do we feel as though children miss out on certain elements of PE due to the nature of our school? So obviously with being military school and children moving around all of the time. I like that she asked that, because I thought it shows that she's got a really good understanding of our school and what it's going to look like for us. So I discussed the fact that we do use an assessment tool for PE, and the fact that it's not just an assessment done at the end of every half term. It's sort of summative and formative, really. So it provides us with opportunity to identify any gaps or any mislearning or progression that we need to sort of implement into our lessons. And then again, I mentioned the fact that it's not just with those children that are military, it might just be giving them that additional support. So working alongside the TA, or me working with them to provide a little bit of support with them on the things that they may have missed due to moving schools.
I like that. Sorry, Abby, I was just going to say, I like the fact that, as you already alluded to, that they asked about your school, so they know your school context. They've looked a little bit into that, and they realize that's potentially an issue or something you've got to combat. So that says to me that for going into many other schools who might be expecting a deep dive in PE, that they may well have a bit of insight into your school context. So what is it that makes your school unique or different? And they may well come at a question with an angle towards that, as opposed to it being just a broad brush approach and asking every school exactly the same questions. There may well be something which is very unique to you. So that's really interesting.
Yeah, definitely. And she asked me about how we assess PE. So I spoke about the fact that we use Insight. Some of you may be familiar with Insight tracking, a little bit like Target Tracker, really. So we use Insight and we put some statements on there and we assess against that. But we also use something called Seesaw, which I'm not sure if some of you use, and which is basically just an app whereby you can upload photos, you can upload videos, you can tag skills in it, you can write comments on it. It's great. And the parents also have access to it as well. What I sort of asked for us to do as a school is, when we're assessing against them, trying over the unit of work that you're doing, whether it be dance or gymnastics or outdoor adventurous, whether you try and pick a different caliber of children to record. So you've got evidence for expected at gymnastics, you've got evidence for working towards, you've got evidence for somebody who's showing greater depth, all of that. So we try to create video evidence on our Seesaw that we've got. And that was brilliant. That was the most valuable thing that I've done. Because after that, I've jumped ahead of myself here, but after that, once we'd had this conversation, she then said to me, right, so you told me you've got these videos. I want to see a strand of gymnastics that shows progression throughout the whole school. So I had to go back on Seesaw, and it was all archived because it was from the previous year. And then get all of the videos off and show her, right, this is what in year one or in EYFS, this is what gymnastics would look like. In year one at the vault, it would look like this. In year two, and year three. And I showed her a few examples of the videos. And afterwards, she just sort of went, yep, great. I mean, I don't know whether that was her wanting to see them or whether it was just quizzing me at the fact that, have I actually done what I'm saying I'm doing?
Yeah.
Holding me to account a little bit. But that was one of the most time-consuming things that during the thing I was getting panicked because I thought, oh gosh, I've got to find them and I have to sit through everything.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I suppose she could well have been just testing you on the fact you'd answered before, you've done it. So actually, all right, let's see this. What does it look like? Just to check that you have got all your ducks lined up, as it were. So that's really interesting. That's fascinating.
Yeah, and another thing that she was really keen on was, what other links do we have as a school with other wider opportunities, wider community links, really. So what club links do we have? So I spoke about any outside agencies that we've had in school, either during curriculum time or after school. The fact that, you know, it's not just building up one club, it might lead up to a range of clubs. And I even spoke about the fact that we swim locally, which again builds up a good relationship with them. But she was very, very hot on that. And again, it was sort of linked into the competition element, which obviously meant that children, if they're doing it in school, they're more likely to compete outside of school. And that sort of thing. And she also asked about how do we cater for SEND children in PE? And has there been a child that has struggled to participate in PE due to their needs? If so, how did we overcome it? So that was a big one. And for that one, you sort of sit and you think, oh, you're racking your brains to try and think of an example. But I just spoke about the fact that we have got a lot of children with SEND in our school. And I spoke about, there was one girl, particularly in year 6, that we had last year, who unfortunately had to wear a back brace, and it was for so many hours a day. I think it was about 10 hours a day. So she just could not participate in PE. It was just a no-go. So I tried to then say it was more about her coaching, learning the rules, becoming a bit of a mentor, becoming a bit of a judge, if you like, if she was watching dance or if she was watching something. I think it's being able to provide an answer. We all know that we do it. I mean, I sat there during that conversation. I'm quite a nervous speaker anyway. And I sat there in the conversation, and the amount of times I had to say, please, can you just repeat that? Could you repeat that? Because you'd find yourself going off on a tangent. But from my experience, don't be afraid to just ask for the question again, or just write the question down before you answer.
I think that's a really good bit of advice, is that just to settle yourself down and don't be scared to ask, just to make sure you're answering exactly what it is that they're looking for. And that the SEND question, I would imagine, will come up in pretty much every context in terms of how are all being catered for? How is your provision inclusive? I think that's one of the key ingredients to excellent PE, as well as excellent across subjects, is it inclusive? Is everyone achieving moments of success? And how are they catered for? And I think on the micro, even for those who maybe you wouldn't class as being SEND, you're always looking at ways to scaffold and differentiate to provide moments of success. But then if you've got those examples like you had then of the girl with the back brace, it might be one extremity that's a barrier for them. How are they overcoming that, and what you're doing for them? And I think lots of us would be able to, on this call, will be able to say up your sleeve, you'll have examples of what that looks like in your context. So that's great.
And with that in mind, talking about SEND children, once she'd observed the lesson, she said, I want to obviously speak to a couple of pupils, and every time, no matter what subject it was in our school, it was one child with SEND or one with pupil premium. So they wanted SEND children to be spoken to and to be heard, their voices to be listened to. Prepare yourself for that. So if you do know the calibre of children that you've got out there, I mean, for our littlies in year 1, that was quite difficult, obviously, for them to sit with somebody else anyway. But just have in mind perhaps that when you are going around and you are looking at year groups they'll look for a broad range of perspectives. And it's, I suppose, to see if that aligns with what you've said. If you're saying you're providing provision or a curriculum a certain way for these individuals, they're going to try and double check that, and they're going to quiz and ask those individuals what their perspective is, and does it match up, or is it completely contrasting, and so forth. So that's interesting. So other than the questions that you were asked, some of the ones you shared with us there, were there any questions on the day that you can recall which came as a bit of a shock or a surprise, and you thought, oh, I didn't expect that to come in the deep dive? Well, there was one question that she asked. Now, I can't remember the wording of it, so I'm sorry. But she asked something along the lines of, how do your children link PE with being healthy? Something along that. And I thought we were talking about the Healthy Schools Award, because we just got gold for that. So we've been doing loads of stuff about it. But with us being such a big school, I don't do the Healthy Schools Award. It's another girl who does. So I started trying to talk about that the best that I could. And I came out thinking, I've not answered that right. I don't know what she meant by being healthy. And
I wonder if was she, and again, I don't know because I wasn't there, but was it was it pitched towards one of the national curriculum aims? I think it's the 4th aim on the national curriculum is children should know how to lead healthy, active lives. That's the 4th bullet point down. So wondering how your curriculum, I guess, slants towards that.
Yeah, I think she wanted to know how the healthy lifestyle is put across the whole of our curriculum, not just PE, and how are children made aware that that is really key to being healthy, is to have a healthy, active lifestyle. I think that's what she was looking for. I mean, I won't ever know probably what she was wanting the perfect answer to be. But there was something on there about the healthy, active lifestyles. I think it was that, Ryan, and that just threw me, and I don't know why it did.
Yeah, and I suppose, you know, they're coming at it from the perspective of whatever knowledge they're coming at it from. I know what they will have and they will know is what the 4 aims of the national curriculum are. We could go down an entire rabbit hole here, whether we agree or disagree with those 4 aims and whether they're fit for purpose currently, but that they are what they are. And the 4th one down, you know, other than the competence piece, which is at the top, there's obviously engaging in competitive activities, but one of them is about they have knowledge to lead healthy, active lives, and how your curriculum or provision will hopefully cater towards that and see that. So that's an interesting one. Was there any other ones in there or were they all sort of par for the course, what you expected?
I think they were all quite fair, really. And I mean, I know you see all the time on forums and on social media, don't you? Oh, they asked this. I've just had a deep dive. These are the types of questions. I mean, you would have read as much as me, everyone on the call, at what the type of questions that they ask. And they are probably just spot on where you're seeing them all over online. But I mean, I think the thing that got me was the video evidence, when she asked to see the video evidence, especially with the brand and the active, healthy lifestyles. Yeah,
interesting. Okay, so with that said, then looking back on the experience as a whole, now you've gone through it, you understand what was asked of you. Is there anything going back? I know hindsight's a wonderful thing, but anything that you, looking back, you wish you personally, or maybe as the school, had have done differently if you could go through it again?
Well, there was one after the first day. We were all texting each other at the night saying, "Oh, how do you think it's gone?" Because we had 2 days, and they asked for planning, and I was surprised, and I thought, "Oh, okay, that's fine." And I'd already given the long-term and shown her everything, but they were asking to see on the planning what we have an assessment box. So on my assessment box of planning, I might write, "Are your toes pointed?" as a question, for example. And they were checking whether or not I had the assessment for every single year group and whether it was progressive. Now, I panicked. So I went on and I looked at everybody's plan. As you do, you look at people's plans anyway. But then I started tweaking them because I was conscious that my head, I'm gymnastics background. So sorry if I keep relating everything to that. I just thought, right, I'm going to pick gymnastics because I know that's one element that I know really well, and I'm going to make sure it is progressive. So I quickly changed some of the questioning on it and printed it off. And that was fine. I mean, if I hadn't have done that, I don't think they'd have batted an eyelid, to be honest. I think it was just me being extremely cautious and wanting to get it right to the T. But probably I would say make sure that I have more opportunity to check the planning as a PE lead. Back now, and making sure that your assessment on your planning is there and it's clear what we are looking for, and it is progressive.
Yeah, and I suppose context dependent, and there's people on the call who've got a variety of tools they use for their planning and assessment, schemes out there, complete PEs of the world that get set for PEs, maybe something more in-house that you've tailored, but as long as you and all the staff know where it is and what it is and all understand the process of it, I think showing them that should be absolutely fine. Just a couple to finish then, Abby, because I really appreciate this. And again, those who are on the call, if you've got any questions, please feel free to start popping them in the chat, because you'll have far more to ask than I do, currently sitting in the role that you have, and how it might pertain to your school and your setting. So do put them in the chat and we can sort of ask away in a moment. But is there anything now, since that experience back in September, that you are doing as a result of the PE deep dive? So you've now started doing it because of a light being shined on something then, or because you think, actually, that's something we should be doing? Any changes?
So in our inspection, it actually mentioned, I can't remember the wording off the top of my head, but it mentioned something about our assessment, and it actually words something along the lines of we're assessing quite frequently, almost too frequently, on things in depth. So one thing we have done is we've gone back to all of our insight statements, not just with PE, but with every sort of foundation subject, and we've stripped the statements right back, and we've tried to only do around 2 or 3 statements for each unit that we cover. Now with PE, that was really difficult for me, because I thought, how can I prioritise and how can I be the one that decides what we're assessing against? But that was difficult. But that's one thing we've gone back through and just tried to pick something that we feel is evident across each year group to assess against, and try and make them fewer. Workload for everybody else. And my other thing would just be ensuring that our assessments, again, when I went back through and started typing all my gymnastics assessment, made sure that it wasn't just skills, it included knowledge as well. So you're teaching, I don't know, a chest pass or something outside, that's your skill, but making sure that in your assessment box you have got, does the child know where to stand in the centre position, for example. They've got both, so skill and knowledge is in there. That's one thing we've been trying.
I suppose that links to what they're, the most recent things they're looking for, which is the procedural and the declarative knowledge, the show how, but also know what and know how as well. So yeah, a child can show a chest pass, or they can show close control of an object, but do they know how to do that? Do they know how they should move? Do they know where to stand? Do they know when to perform such a skill? And so we'd like children to have both, but some children will be able to do one and not the other. They'll know how to do something, but they may not be of a brilliant standard at showing it, but they've got the knowledge of, and some vice versa the other way around as well. So that's really interesting and something to sort of bear in mind. And when I've worked with some schools and PE leads in North Yorkshire recently, we've discussed that in terms of when you're planning, how you're factoring in what you want your children to show you at the end of a unit in terms of the physical skills, but also what do you want them to know in terms of the knowledge side of things as well, which is wider than just the physical aspects as well. I found that really useful, Abby, myself. So I'm sure everybody else on the call feels the same way. It's at this point where I did sort of put a slide on here, which did throw out the prospect of questions, but you've articulated it so wonderfully. Nobody's popped any in the chat at the moment, but I am just going to give everybody another chance now, whether you want to pop it in the chat or unmute and ask Abby anything with regards to that deep dive experience she's just explored before we let her go for the evening. Whether it's any comments, anything that you want to know from her experience, or questions regarding what you should be looking out for. Has anybody got anything to throw our way?
I should mention actually as well, she didn't actually specifically go through our spending, which I was shocked at.
Okay, that's an interesting one. So it didn't actually look at the PE premium side of things.
I mean, I showed her my file and she might have had a look at it, but nothing was mentioned about it.
Good question from Amy's just coming on the chat. I don't know if you've opened it, Abby, but just asking, did they mention anything about your school website at all and look into that or look on it? Or
no, but they may have done to Ian, my head teacher. They probably did probably may have done all the website and everything. I know that our head has been really, really funny on our website, and he's been, bless him, he spent hours on it prior to Ofsted, and everything's been revamped. So everything was on there. But what I also did was I made sure that whatever our vision statement for PE on the website, I always have a copy of it in my file as well. So I don't know whether that's why she may not have asked me about it, because it was in there. But no, they didn't mention anything about our website, no.
Lovely. Thanks for that. And Faye's just jumped on and is asking, she said, thank you, but also a couple of things. Did you ask to be selected for a deep dive in PE, or was it automatically that's just what they're doing? And do you use a planning scheme as a school?
Okay, so we had some sort of practice deep dive, if you like. And there was a couple of us in our school with our subjects that had been told that it could be us. We'll just sort of see how things go. And on the telephone call with the Ofsted inspector, our head teacher tried to sway them towards the subjects that we felt we wanted to show off, really. So I sort of knew that I would be in the pipeline. So yeah, I was sort of chosen really, and I didn't mind at all. And sorry, what was the other question?
I think it just was in terms of PE. Do you use a planning scheme?
Oh, right. Okay. No, we don't use a planning scheme. We just have just got skill progression sheets that I've designed and sort of tweaked and looked at things online as well myself. And we just follow that skill progression document really, and have our own medium-term plans that we produce.
So on that then, Abby, do your staff in school have the flexibility to plan activities and lessons as long as it meets that progression? They can piece it together however they feel comfortable.
Yeah, and that's one thing I was big on, because I felt like a lot of our subject leaders in our school at the moment, whether it be computing or what it might be, might design something with some ideas on, which is fantastic. But I felt for me with PE, it's one of those things where you might not be comfortable delivering hockey, but you might be comfortable with delivering football. So I just sort of designed the skill progression, and I've said to them, as long as you're covering the skills, and as long as we've got a range of sports within the year, then yeah, absolutely go for it.
Lovely. Smashing. And I think Jason's just made the point saying that actually they may have had a look at the website in their own time, and just it might not have been something that's mentioned. They may have seen the spends from the PE premium and just thought, yeah, that's all good, and not needed to pursue and ask and dig deeper into it. But again, it may be something which you can't rule out entirely. That's not to say if somebody else on the call had them come in, they may well ask that. Who knows? They will all go very differently. Although I'm sure a lot of the information you shared, there will be things which absolutely will be on the question list for every visit that they have. But I think you've articulated it very well there, and I'm sure went absolutely brilliantly based on the knowledge you've got and the hold that you've got over the subject, Abby, which is really clear to see. So thank you for sharing that with us. I massively appreciate it. I don't want to keep you any longer, and I look forward to catching up with you soon, Abby. You feel free to dash off, or you can stay for another 15 minutes to listen to me.
Don't be disheartened if you do get chosen for PE as a deep dive. Don't expect anything to be written in the report, because there was nothing.
All your hard work, yeah.
So you look through and you think, what? There's nothing there after all that time. So yeah. But thank you very much.
No, cheers, Abby. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye. Fantastic. Well, that was really useful, and I hope you found it as useful as I did, just hearing a little bit about that perspective. And you'll read on forums and on social media outlets, and maybe speak to others who've gone through it. And there's similarities in them. We're not going to deny that, but there's also differences and slight quirks which made them all different. And it's nice to hear from somebody local to us here in North Yorkshire, of course, who's gone through that reasonably recently. And hopefully there's food for thought there for some of you in terms of what she explained, Abby, and what she did. For you to take back into your setting too. Now, just to finish, I don't want to be any more than maybe 10 or 15 minutes with this, and this is information that I shared at the Swaledale LP meeting back in November, and I've probably touched upon bits of this in various courses that I've delivered over the past few months, and in my time as well, wearing North Yorkshire's hat and the PE umbrella hat as well. But I just wanted to touch upon it in terms of the PE curriculum. Just for a few thoughts, and it's not intended to have anyone's curriculums crashing down or tearing them and ripping them up, but just to share a few thought pieces, little bits of research and ideas around the PE curriculum and how we structure it and why we structure it. And I suppose the first question here is not necessarily for us to have an open forum chatting, but for you to think honestly in your heads, and actually even if you want to add answers in the chat to be interactive, you can do, about what units you teach in your school. What are they called and what units are they? So you may well be answering this in your head now, or if you put it on the chat, and you might be typing football, gymnastics, dance. I'm not too sure. I want you to just be mulling these over as I bring them on the screen or typing them in the chat. But I also want you to think about when you teach them. When do you teach the units that you teach in school? So if it is a football, when do you teach it? If it's gymnastics, when do you teach gymnastics? If it's tennis or net and wall games, when do you teach that? And consider why you teach it then. What's the reason you put it where it is? Is it because you've thought carefully about how you want your curriculum structured and they're in a particular order? Or are you dictated by your environment? Are you dictated by your timetabling across the school? Are you dictated by the Great British weather? But I just want you to mull that over. When do you teach the units that you've put penciled down? And then I want you to take a step further and think about, why do you teach those units? So if you're teaching net and wall games, or football, or tag rugby, dance, gymnastics, and so forth, whatever you brand them as, why do you teach those units? Is there a reason? Is it because it's in the scheme you've bought into? Is it because you've always done it that way in the school that you're in and that's just the way it is? Or is it because there's been other facilitation with members of staff or pupils as to what their interests are? And I suppose finally, for you to mull over and consider is how long are the units or blocks of work that you deliver? Are they, as is often the case, slotted into those 6-week blocks half-termly? Or is there any of you on the call who have flexibility within that, who have shorter blocks of work, or maybe even longer blocks that last 7, 8, 9, 10 weeks, maybe a full term? And I want you to mull that over, and depending on how long they are, just consider again, why are they that long? What reason? And the reason I'm asking you to mull over these questions and think about them as I talk about curriculum is, and again, bits and pieces I've shared before, is that we often think about PE, particularly when it's compartmentalized into blocks. It's a very linear approach. It's very A to B. It's week 1 to 6 or week 1 to 7. And oftentimes the depth of learning achieved through such an approach isn't as rigorous as I feel needs to be with pupils who are exposed to 1 or 2 PE lessons a week in a school. Now, this isn't always how it would look week 1 to 6, but in the past, I've seen units structured in such a way, even from the all largest schemes and organizations who push their stuff out there. Now, in this instance, even though you could argue you might touch upon aspects of dribbling whilst you're doing passing, shooting, attacking, it's not the focal point of that lesson in this instance. We visit dribbling in week 1, and then that's not the focus anymore. And my sort of counter argument in terms of the depth of learning is if we're only doing it in week 1 as a focus to really enhance our dribbling skills in a sport, in this instance, such as football, they're not really revisiting that skill for probably another full year. They've done dribbling in week 1 of football in year 3, and they're not revisiting it until week 1 of football in year 4. What is the depth and quality of learning those pupils are achieving? My argument would be that we could do a number of weeks of dribbling in different contexts and different mini games and activities to really embed and add some rigor into that learning so they can improve and build a foundation to their skill set, their physical skill set, that gives them an element of competence and confidence to spread their wings elsewhere. So it's more of a counter argument to yourselves of it. Think about how you structure your learning, even if it's schemes you've bought in, and think, is that the way we should be structuring it? Can we be more flexible in that approach? And that's what I would advocate to anybody on this call or anybody who care to listen across the country. Even in this instance, if you've done week 1 of dribbling, don't feel bound that you've got to do in week 2 the passing aspect. Well, in week 2, maybe you need to do some more dribbling because actually your class might require that and might need that. And I shared this many times on many of my platforms because ultimately this is what happens if we go through that very linear process. It's a bit like Jenga. Hannah Miller on the Ofsted call last year shared this herself. And if we're only touching upon elements of learning very lightly for 1 week, maybe even briefly for a second lesson, you're putting these blocks in place of physical skills and placing them on top of each other. But if we don't do it enough and give it enough rigor, which we do in the classroom with phonics and with times tables, it's foundational. If we don't do that in PE, then the blocks that you're stacking on top of each other either become slightly misplaced, or actually, if we don't do it enough, they're not there at all. The blocks simply don't exist. If that's the case, we're risking the future learning that comes on top of that. Anything else you stack on top because your plans and because that progression tells you to, that tower then becomes at risk. And sooner or later, like you can see in this picture, it's going to come tumbling down. And for some kids, that can be make or break time in terms of their future participation in physical activities or sports. So therefore, looking into research, we know that there's research telling us about certain aspects of how we deliver PE. And particularly multi-activity and sport-based curriculums, there's research to suggest it's maybe not the way to go, particularly at a primary setting. Now, that's not to say you wouldn't ever use sport as a vehicle for learning at all. But particularly with this second quote in this instance, I think this is something that resonates with me and something definitely to bear in mind. That multi-activity sport technique-based PE underserves many children and young people from ethnic minority backgrounds, who live in precarity, who are disabled, and who are female. And I also know there's lots of curriculums out there which will be sport technique-based PE, of just doing sports, sometimes successful seemingly on the surface, but we know from research, as is said here, there are many children and young people that it really does underserve and aren't getting the most from such an experience. So it's something to certainly bear in mind depending on your own context as well. Now, that isn't to say don't ever teach a sport as your vehicle for learning in a PE curriculum, because if you've got a class or a group or a cohort of children who are all cricket, football, insert other sport crazy, as a teacher, for me, I'd be daft to not use that as a vehicle, because there's an immediate buy-in. And if I can meet the national curriculum through that, I will do. But it's certainly something to consider depending on how your curriculum's structured and what you've got in it. So we want to change. That linear approach is something we want to eradicate and change if possible and be more flexible in our teaching. And I've shared this for a number of years now, but I am, again, not going to apologise for resharing it because I'm really passionate about it. We wouldn't often go on a journey through a week of maths from Monday starting at number bonds, and we're doing multi-step problems by Friday. It's layered, it takes time, and over a period of weeks we get there, but not in 1 week. Yet in PE, we seem to have this trajectory which just bounces around from where we are to where we'd like to be without thought of how we're layering that learning as we go. If you've not seen it before, this very briefly, I won't go into too much detail. This is an excellent document. You can find, if you Google Principal Curriculum Design, William 2013, there's a PDF which goes into detail of these 7 principles of curriculum design, of what needs to be in place for what he says is a real solid curriculum. And it isn't just for PE, this is for any subject. But I've chosen 3 out of here that I firmly believe need to be in place. And that's that a curriculum in PE is rigorous. So there is repetition so that we are repeating skills to gain a level of competence, that it's coherent, whereby as you go through your units or blocks, however you brand them, that you're dragging learning across with you. So it's not right, we've finished our invasion games or our football, and now we're doing gymnastics. And it's not like pulling off a plaster and now it's brand new learning. It's actually, what have we learned from our invasion games or football unit that we're going to drag across with us and plonk down at the start of gymnastics and say, right, here's some learning that we're taking with us. Remember when we did X, Y, and Z? We're going to build upon that in this context now for our gymnastics unit of work, and making sure that's something which is coherent and you can drag throughout, whether it's physical skills, cognitive, social, emotional, and the like as well. And then finally, vertically integrated, it's fancy terminology, but actually, is it progressive, and does it improve in terms of the skill level that's expected and the outcome that's expected from the pupils as they progress through school as well? But little caveats, not to say if you've got pupils in year 4 that you can't have a look at some of the year 3 learning, because we know pupils are all so diverse in where they're at. That's just how it works when children are learning and developing. You can have year 3s who are more than capable of being as good, if not better, than some year 6s, and vice versa as well. So we'll look at learning more of a bit of a cyclical approach, more of a cycle, rather than saying it's week 1 to 6, A to B. Can we be learning and exploring concepts? Can we be consolidating concepts? Can we be developing concepts? And actually come week 3, if it was dribbling, maybe we're still doing it in week 3, but we've explored different ways we can dribble an object. We've consolidated that through some mini games, and we're going to develop that in week 3 with a bit of, could be some passive defenders or some pressure that's on us. So we're really building a core level of competence with a set skill before we move on to something else, so we can lend that into a different context. Just final bit from me that I want to share, and this is taken what I share often on the level 4 course that I deliver, but I think it needs to be spread more widely. It's just one snapshot on one piece that I want to share here about your curriculum and your pupils in school and your context, and actually how everything aligns together. I've always said I'm an advocate for buying a scheme in as a base level. Absolutely, in every school, it gives you that sense of structure and progression and something to hang your hat on. But then beyond that, over time, how are we adapting it for our pupils and context? So in the essence of what I'm sharing with you here is actually, how does the structure of your curriculum, however it's structured, how does it promote success for your pupils? How does that structure promote your pupils to be successful in what it is you've laid on for them? Of course, those successes will come down to the detail of the pedagogy and the teaching and the day-to-day intricacies as well, the art and science. But how does the structure promote success in what you've got on? how do the activities that you're on your curriculum, how do they align with your pupils' interests? Or do they at all? Do we know what our pupils are interested in? Do the activities we put on our curriculum align with that? And then at the top there, we're just having a quick look at purpose and motivations. So actually, how does your curriculum purpose? What is the purpose of your curriculum? What do you want your pupils to be or look like at the end of year 6? And does that align with what motivates them? Like, what motivates your kids and pupils to want to do PE, to want to be physically active? And if you're not sure, how can we get to the nitty-gritty of what that looks like and what it is? And then finally, last couple of slides from me, because it's something I'm passionate about. Again, we know with our curriculums that there's so much more to it than simply learning sports skills anyway, because the national curriculum and Key Stage 1 and Key Stage 2 here, when we overlay it with the 4 domains of learning in this instance, there's so much more to be drawn out. Yes, there's physical things on there, but there is also aspects to focus on in terms of social development, cognitive development, and potentially most importantly in the current climate, emotional development as well, regulating themselves and acknowledging how they feel when they're angry, sad, happy, frustrated, and all of the above as well. I share this on every talk that I ever do, but it really hits home with me. And I don't know if it's because I've got 2 children of my own, but I firmly believe in this. And I share it widely with any staff in school who care to listen. And it actually doesn't matter if they can do advanced maths and speak 3 languages, but actually if children can't manage their emotions and practice conflict resolution, things which raise its head in physical education more than any other subject on the curriculum, as well as also at playtimes, then that other stuff doesn't matter. So I think that has to be a vital piece in the learning we put on and part of our curriculum as well, and we need to acknowledge that through how we deliver and what we deliver. So enough of my ranting on. I just wanted to touch upon briefly of that. If you've got any questions for me or any rebuttals to coming back, fire them in the chat. You can even hang around to do so. But I want to draw this to a close just with a bit of a save the date here. I know it says 3:30 till 5, but when I have a little look at our poll that we ran, I'll determine whether that is still the best time or whether we can go for an afternoon slot. But that is the date for the summer North Yorkshire PE Lead and North Yorkshire and York, PE Lead Network meeting. That is now live as well on the website online. As you can see on the screen here, there's also a link for it. If you go in to visit that link, you can access it and book on now. The sooner you book on, the sooner you can forget about it until June, and you don't need to worry about it until I email you the Zoom link the day before, of course. So there's no need to stress, but I will be sending reminders closer to the time in case you forget. So you can jump on that. We don't have an agenda set yet. It will, of course, cover updates. Hopefully there'll be something on the PE Premium at that point. And we'll see if we get anybody on to come and speak and share their stories with us as well. That's all from me for this afternoon/evening. I appreciate your patience enormously, particularly with the technical fault that we had earlier. I'm not quite sure why that happened, but thanks for persevering and staying here with me. This will be recorded and saved and pick up from the point just before when Abby spoke. So if you want to replay that back and re-listen to what Abby shared pertaining to the deep dives or any of the bits and pieces that I've just rattled on about to you as well, you'll be able to do that and I will send that out. If you want to hang around and chat with me, feel free to do so. If not, take care, everybody. Have a lovely evening, and I look forward to catching up with you shortly.
Hi, Ryan. Hiya.
Hi there.
Hiya. Sorry, I won't keep you very long.
That's fine.
I've just started with PE Lead this year, so I'm still getting my head around everything. But what I'd like to do is I'd like to take it to more of a holistic approach, because we're very much at the minute, we do like the tag rugby for 6 weeks and then the football for 6, you know, and that. Would you recommend anything to sort of, we haven't got loads of money, but would you recommend, I know you're still about buying into a scheme, would you, I know there's quite a lot out there, would you recommend anything in particular?
What is it you use at the minute? Sorry. We don't
use one at the moment. We have talked about maybe possibly doing the real PE thing, and I went on an inclusion course the other week and there was a couple of suggestions there, but I just wonder if you'd recommend. I mean, is it something you could do yourself? Do you know what I mean?
You could. I mean, obviously, I'm currently wearing my North Yorkshire sport hat. Yeah. And I would always, as I can see Amy's put there, I would always say the PE umbrella. But it's not a
Yeah.
scheme. That's just a concept, if you like. The best person to ask about that is Amy, who's on the call. And I don't know if Amy would mind sharing her email address, or she could maybe talk you through a couple of how she did it in her school and what she does. But it's worked really well for her in her context.
Okay.
Obviously, Amy is based over in York. Where are you based, Erica?
For York.
All right, so Amy's based in York as well. So
Yeah.
she's at AYJS, and I know she's on the call. So that will be one aspect. It's not a scheme per se, but it's the concept of the PE umbrella and looking at the 4 domains of learning and drawing that out of what you do. You could do it with the existing things that you have, because if you're delivering football or whatever that may be, there may be a skill focus, but it's really hanging your hat on, well, okay, but today, what social skills do we need in this session? And what does good communicating look like? And what does it mean to be a good listener? And it giving the children opportunities to see they can be successful in PE, even if they're not the best dribbler of a football, because they've got great communication, organization, problem-solving skills. In terms of a scheme, I can throw a handful at you now, but what I would highly recommend is, yes, use it if you want to invest into one. Use it as a base point to give you a bit of structure, a rough guide of where you want to go. But it's not written for your school. They'll have just written a general scheme, and they can't ever hope to make it successful everywhere, because your equipment, your pupils, your environment, it's different everywhere. So just bearing that in mind. The ones that frequently come up in these conversations, certainly in North Yorkshire, are Get Set for PE. I'd definitely look into that. I've heard really good things about it. I've not got any first-hand experience using it, but I've heard good things about Get Set for PE, and that's Get Set, the number 4. PE. A couple of schools in North Yorkshire use Complete PE. The PE Hub is another one I don't see used as widely, but I've seen some of their bits and pieces in it, and it looks reasonable. So the PE Hub. I know you've mentioned Create Development and Real PE. I've heard mixed reviews of that. I've heard some schools who really like it. But equally other schools who say, we can't get on board with this. We find it quite difficult and boring. So that's kind of each to their own. The best thing to do will be to try and look into some of these and ask for a free trial. And they'll all give you one.
You know the PE umbrella. Where do I just search that? Is that?
Oh yeah. So PE umbrella is my it's my podcast. It's kind of my I don't want to call it a business, but it's what I run on the side of my job at North Yorkshire Sport. It's predominantly started as a podcast. It's a PE podcast that I hosted and interviewed individuals and spoke on that. But it evolved into what really I've got is a set of activity cards which I pieced together. There's just a range of activities from sort of EYFS through to year 6, split up into some learning areas such as net and wall games, warm-ups, invasion games. And the activity cards are meant, for me, it's more of a supplement to if you've got a scheme or something it's a supplement in terms of it gives staff other ideas as what other activities could I deliver in a unit about this. So here's some suggestions. And on the activity cards, it's got how you set the activity up. It's got suggestions for questioning pertaining to those 4 areas of physical, cognitive, social, emotional. It's got progressions for the activities. And as well as for staff, I've sort of pitched it. I advocate young leaders as well using it. So some of the warm-up games you can easily give to some young leaders if you've got them, so they can deliver some of those activities at playtimes as well. But you can find it over at peumbrella.com.
Lovely. Oh, that sounds like a really good starting point for us, actually. So it's just getting my head around everything. Do you know?
Absolutely. I can see it. I completely appreciate that, but just take it one step at a time, because it's never going to get done immediately. But as long as you've got an idea of what you want to do and where you want to go, and you've logged that as part of that's your goal for PE, then it doesn't matter if anyone comes in and questions. But you are where you are. You can't change that. But as long as you've acknowledged where you want to go, the journey is the important bit. And if you said, well, we are looking into getting a scheme and we're looking to implement this, it's part of our plan, and that's absolutely fine. You're acknowledging that, and you'll work your way towards it. I've just seen Leanne's, I think, typed in the chat, although I can't see the chat, about PE Hub.
Where
is it?
I can see that.
Yeah, there we go. It's just about.
I was just going to say, Ryan, if you don't mind, Erica, you're welcome to come into our school at any point and just see it, because I know sometimes you're new to PE, aren't you, and someone blasting things, it's a bit hard to visualize it, but more than happy for you to come into our school and just have a chat or see a couple of lessons, see how we use it, and
Oh, that sounds good. Yeah.
take
Thanks.
it from there. But yeah, I'm more than happy to talk it through. And like Ryan said, it's not a scheme, but we've completely changed in the last 2 years our whole approach to how we teach PE. So I'm happy to chat through and take bits that you like or adapt it, change it. Or
Oh, hey, could I
yeah.
be cheeky and have your email address?
Yeah, because I'll put it in the chat bit and you can have it.
Brilliant. Thanks.
Yeah.
Oh no, that's great. Thank you. I'll just get a starting point and then take it from there. That's
Yeah,
fantastic.
you get a lot from a visit. I was the same even when I went to visit Amy's school, and I feel like when I go to lots of schools, you can get very siloed where you're at sometimes and not see what else is going on, and it's just opens your eyes and you can think, oh, that would work, or that might not for us, but we'll pinch that idea. So it'd be great if you could organise that, and then let me know how you get on, if you can get sort of a half day just to go see Amy and see the kids in action, what they get up to and how they view PE, really, which is really refreshing and nice to see how the context at which they view PE, the lens they look at the subject through, and how they're learning across those 4 domains.
No, that sounds brilliant. No, thanks, Ryan, and thanks, Amy. That's fantastic. Thanks ever so much.
No worries, you're welcome.
I'll be in touch. Thank you.
Lovely. Yeah, if you need anything, just give us a shout. Take care.
Thanks a lot. Cheers. Bye.
Bye-bye. Okay. Unless anybody else wants to chat, I bid you all farewell and take care.